How's it going today, guys? Back at it on the 63 Chevy 2. I went through and printed out the locations where I can measure. I've been using this. Right now I have clamps holding the leaf spring mounts, which are these little fellas here, to get it into 48, since mine had been, I don't know if they'd been dropped or they'd just been smashed into, or people had been jumping railroad tracks and it just kind of tore them up. So I got this dimension set out there. I have a monkey on the stick clamp, I believe is what it's called, pushing between the subframe rails. I'll have to take the screws out so I can push them in and get them pressed up against the leaf spring mounts. But I also went through and wrote down all the measurements so I don't have to go through my book all the time and have it out there. I could just have this piece of paper there. One measurement I was worried about is this rear one from it's 43 and 7/16 between the center line of this bolt hole to this bolt hole, was where and that's where the bumper mounts up. So I went out and bought a 48-inch piece of angle iron. And I measured it out, and it was actually a 1/16 smaller than what it should have been, and I had my measurement from the book. Went ahead, did the math, came out to 2¼ on the side, marked it out, drilled it. I went a 64th larger, so I'm going to trying to hold some pretty tight tolerances on this. The 7/16 rod is a little loose in there, so it might be a little bit, the drill bit may have walked and wobbled it out, made an oversized hole. Not a big deal. I have a 1/8 inch to play with, I believe is what the specifications call, or is it a 16th? It might be a 16th. I'm pretty sure it's a 16th now that I say that. It's going to get a little boring if I'm just looking through everything. Yeah, within a 16th dimensions. So I have some 7/16 14 rod. I'm going to run those down so that way I get this. The rod will be hopefully to the same height as this, the whole location on the leaf spring mount. That way I can just come across and get my cross, because really the only measurements I'm going to be able to focus on is I'll get this squared up, I'll get this pushed in there, and then I'm going to measure from here to here and then from here to here, and hopefully that's square enough for what I need. Guess we'll find out later on after it's welded in. But I got a little bit of work to do yet to the underside. This leaf spring mount was cracked in this corner, so I need to V it out, drill a hole so it doesn't crack anymore, and then weld it in. On the floor pan, there's some really funky welds from the factory that I need to hole saw out, because it's not going to allow I think it's going to kind of mess the weld itself. The messed up metal is not going to allow the subframe rail to sit nicely against the floor pan. We'll go out there and I'll show you what I'm talking about. For reference, here is the spot I'm talking about. You can see how the metal is thicker on one side. I believe this is factory, because I haven't welded here, and I don't think the other guy did, the previous owner. Could have been a repair at some point, but it is real messed up, and you could just feel and see how thick the metal is there. You can see it's pushed up into that area, so I'm going to hole saw this out and then hammer this stuff down. So I went ahead and installed the sheet metal that goes right here, as you can see, to stiffen up the rear of the floor pan. Once I get the subframes tacked in, I will probably sheet metal screw it to the subframe rails and then drop in the trunk pan just to kind of see how that fits. I don't plan to install it quite yet. I'd like to get the inner fender wells and outer fender wells situated, as well as the rear quarters, since they are bowed in at the rear, to kind of prevent me from having to grind out spot welds a bunch. Just sheet metal screws, so make it easier to go in and out and move stuff. A little bit easier way of doing things. So I got some F clamps, as previously stated, on the rear leaf spring mounts, both sides of the monkey on the stick, pushing the subframe rails. Right now it just has a little bit of tension on it, so that way it holds it up, because I don't want to have to drag it back and forth where I have it stored. So I'll pull those sheet metal screws out here later and then kind of use it to push it snugly with the, as you can see, this one isn't snugged up against the rear torque box, I believe is what they call them. Check this one out. This one looks pretty good though, so I'm not too worried about that. So I will just kind of continue on with progress. I probably won't do a video on me actually measuring it out, because that is going to be a somewhat time-consuming process. I'll probably have a video at the end of what's going on, and I'll have a video here very shortly added into this of how I have the rear set up. That way I kind of explain how I went through everything. You can see visually how I explained it a little bit earlier in this video. Now I know at some point someone's going to say, how are you going to know if your all thread is squared up? And, sorry for the extra noise here, they're cutting the corn across the road. I'm going to go ahead and throw it inside my angle iron again. Now, I'll give it a little bit of a push. And it seems fairly square, because it sits very nicely there inside the angle iron. I'll throw this other piece in and see how it fits as well. It fits very nicely. Doesn't really move too much. So, when I say it's probably pretty straight. Something I've already run into is a 2-inch piece of angle iron. Right in there, that's hitting. So I have to mark it and notch that out real quick. Alright, got the piece cut out. This was the piece that was in there. As you can see on the bottom side, there was quite a bit of a ledge there. So that kind of helped everything settle down. I hammered this all down and tried to make it look a little bit better. I've also gone and drilled a hole in the crack and then V'd everything out. Hopefully that's viewable on there. So I'm going to go ahead and weld it all up, and then I'm kind of thinking about putting the subframe connectors in. That way it'll help hold this rear. According to my levels here, the front, which I would think wouldn't be twisted right where the drivers and the passengers sit, and then my subframe rails back there are leaning to the passenger side is a little higher, so I may have to jack up the right side to get this all, try to match the floor pan. That way everything's squared up. Yeah, alright, I'll continue on. Alright, so if this looks kind of weird than what I'm patching in, it's because the video didn't turn out the way I wanted to, so I'm having to redo this after I've already done what I've done. So here's my setup for the all thread. As you can see, it is hanging out. I measured the height of the brackets, the leaf spring bracket down there, to the, there's the chicken sitting up there making that noise, not me, to the ground. Then I measured from the bottom of this. That way it would be a same plane when going across, and I wouldn't be adding any more length by angling it with a measurement. This all turned out pretty good. It keeps everything apart the way I wanted it to. So that's about it. So I got everything kind of screwed in here. Everything's very stiff, and it's very stiff right now. So that works pretty good. I'm getting ready to put the subframe connectors, which is going to be a whole nother video. And then we'll slip a rear end under it and see how it looks. Alright guys, how's it going today? I'm going to get started on putting together the Competition Engineering subframe connectors on a 63 Chevy 2. Now these are set up for 62 through 67. Got the instructions here, got my tools. Let's get started and see how this turns out. My car's kind of wonky because someone had cuts the rear subframe rails out and everything in the back behind the rear seat. So we'll get started. Step 1 on the instructions is pretty obvious. Get the vehicle jacked up where you can work under it. Step 2 is to loosen up your front leaf spring bolt, which mine was already. I hadn't tightened it. And put in this 1/2-inch washer. Now there's only 2 of them in the pack, so it's pretty easy to figure out which 2 they are. Put that on there. So at this point, that's a little bit of technical difficulties. Got it taken care of. I basically slipped it up, tried to get it back here behind this frame rail a little bit, and now I need to turn it in. However, as you can see, it's not sitting very flat. That's due to the drain hole in the floor. So I'm going to do a little bit of grinding to alleviate some issues here, and hopefully it'll kind of push on up in there. All right. I will say that some people have, from what I've read on forums, they just use a floor jack to push the floor up and fix their issues that way. Either way, I'm just going to grind mine out. After a little bit of finagling, I got mine to all come together. Now, mine isn't the best. That's really odd. Best car to show you this on, because my leaf spring perches have been really utterly beat up. A lot of dirt road jumping, train tracks, whatnot. But the front end is up here as it should be. And at this point, you are to retort your leaf spring bolt and nut to 70 foot-pounds, and then we will proceed to center punching and drilling the mounting holes for the front of the frame connectors using the holes in the U-shaped bracket, and then we'll put some bolts in there, the long 3/8 bolts, center punch and drill the 2 remaining holes in this L-shaped bracket, and put the shorter 3/8 bolts we have into these to bolt it up. And then just repeat for the other side. You're going to need let me get the drill bit around, oh darn it, a 13/32 drill bit to do this. We're going to start drilling the holes. I'm going to turn the camera off because it's going to get real loud and annoying. Alright, I'm getting started. Got the holes drilled up front, got the bolts in, got them snugged up, pretty tight. You're supposed to go to 35 foot-pounds. I'm not too worried about it at the moment, just because I'm going to take these back out and repaint the bottom of my car. As you can tell, it's got a lot of surface rust on it. I was sandblasted at one point, but I need to finish that, the painting process. So we'll get started back here with the 2 holes back here. See if we can get these going. Also, another remark, safety first, especially when you're working under your car. And that's it. Get those holes drilled, your bolts in, and you're good to go. Fortunately for me, mine has quite a bit of a gap in there. I'll be taking care of that later. I'm going to work on the other side. All right, and there you have it. You have your chassis engineering subframe connectors installed. Just like that. All right, thanks for watching.